She was the 14-year-old gatekeeper to a billion-dollar fortune, but her approval couldn't be bought, only earned. If you believe a child's intuition about character is the purest truth, support our mission with a super thanks. And if you stand with Chloe's search for authenticity, leave a "Stay True, Chloe" in the comments below. Chloe Vance's life was a meticulously curated exhibition. She lived in a sprawling 20-acre estate in Chestnut Hill, just outside of Boston, a world of manicured lawns, ancestral portraits, and a silence so profound it seemed to have a weight of its own. At 14, she was fluent in 3 languages, a gifted equestrian, and possessed a quiet, unnerving intelligence that made most adults uncomfortable. She was the sole heir to the Vance fortune, a global shipping and logistics empire built by her grandfather and now expertly managed by her mother, Eleanor Vance. But Chloe was also the guardian of a different kind of inheritance, her mother's heart. Since the death of her father 5 years prior, Chloe had watched as a parade of men, a seemingly endless procession of suitable, wealthy, and utterly soulless suitors, had passed through the grand rooms of their home. They were the men her mother's circle, and perhaps her own pragmatic mind, deemed appropriate. They were investment bankers, tech moguls, and the scions of old Boston families, all of them polished to a high sheen, their smiles as calculated as their stock portfolios. And one by one, with a quiet, unshakable finality, Chloe had rejected them all. Her veto was never loud or dramatic. It was a subtle, powerful force, a quiet refusal to engage in conversation. A single, well-aimed question that exposed the superficiality beneath a suitor's charm, an unnerving, silent stare that seemed to see right through their bespoke suits and into the hollow space where a soul was supposed to be. Her mother, Eleanor, a brilliant and formidable woman who could command a boardroom of powerful men with a single quiet word, was utterly powerless against her daughter's quiet judgment. Eleanor loved her daughter fiercely, and she could not force a man into her life, into their life, that Chloe did not accept. And so the parade continued, 100 different faces of the same man, each one failing the silent, rigorous inspection of the 14-year-old queen. They did not understand that Chloe was not looking for a new father to buy her a pony or a powerful man to secure her inheritance. She was looking for a man of character, a man of honor. She was looking for a man who was worthy of her mother. The latest candidate was a man named Sterling Ashford IV, an almost comical caricature of his class. He had the right family name, the right Ivy League degree, and a portfolio of hedge funds that was the subject of envious whispers on Wall Street. He sat in their formal living room, a room that looked more like a museum than a place where people lived, pontificating about his latest acquisition, his voice a smooth, confident drone. Eleanor listened with a polite, practiced interest, her face a mask of graceful neutrality. Chloe sat in a wing-back chair by the window, ostensibly reading a book, but her attention was fixed on the scene, her young face a mask of quiet, clinical contempt. Sterling, in an attempt to be charming, turned to her. "And what do you like to do, little lady?" he asked, his tone a patronizing pat on the head. "I study the Peloponnesian War," Chloe replied, her voice cool and even, not looking up from her book. Sterling chuckled, a brittle, dismissive sound. "A bit heavy for a young girl, isn't it? You should be reading about princesses, not ancient battles." In that single condescending sentence, he had failed the test, utterly and completely. Chloe did not reply. She simply turned a page, the quiet rustle of the paper a final, damning verdict. It was in the midst of this suffocating tableau that Jackson "Jax" Carter first entered their lives. He was not a guest, he was the help. He was the new driver and security specialist, hired by Eleanor's head of staff after the previous driver had been let go for a minor indiscretion. He entered the room silently, a tall, powerfully built black man in a simple dark suit. He did not walk. He moved with a quiet, controlled economy of motion that was utterly at odds with the languid, entitled postures of the men who usually occupied this space. He stood by the door, his hands clasped loosely behind his back, his presence a silent, unobtrusive pillar of stillness. His job was to be invisible, a piece of human furniture. But to Chloe, he was the most interesting thing to have entered that room in years. She watched him from over the top of her book. She saw that his eyes, unlike the restless, acquisitive eyes of Sterling Ashford, were calm and watchful. He was not looking at the priceless art or the antique furniture. He was scanning the room, noting the exits, the position of the people, the large windows that looked out onto the gardens. He was assessing the environment for threats, a habit so deeply ingrained it was as natural as breathing. A small, insignificant incident occurred that, for Chloe, was a moment of profound revelation. A gust of wind from an open terrace door sent a stack of sheet music, part of a rare first edition, fluttering off the grand piano. The pages scattered across the polished floor. Sterling Ashford, who was closest, did not move. He simply watched the fluttering papers with a look of mild annoyance, as if it were a minor inconvenience arranged by the staff for him to step around. Eleanor made a small sound of distress, starting to rise. But before she could move, Jax was already in motion. He crossed the room in 3 long, silent strides. He did not bend at the waist. He dropped into a low, athletic crouch, a movement of surprising grace and power. He gathered the scattered pages with a swift, efficient precision, his large, capable hands surprisingly gentle with the fragile old paper. He checked the page numbers, putting them back in their correct order, and placed the neat stack back on the piano, weighing it down with a small, decorative paperweight. The entire act took less than 10 seconds. It was a small, perfect demonstration of competence, of quiet service, of seeing a problem and solving it without a word, without a need for acknowledgement. He then retreated to his position by the door, his face a mask of impassive neutrality, as if nothing had happened. But Chloe had seen it. And in that small, simple act, she had seen more character, more quiet dignity and strength than she had seen in the 100 polished, preening peacocks who had paraded through her home. She looked from Jax, the silent, competent soldier standing in the shadows, to Sterling Ashford, the rich, useless man who couldn't be bothered to bend down to pick up a piece of paper. The contrast was a chasm, a canyon that separated 2 entirely different species of men. A new, fascinating line of inquiry opened in her brilliant analytical mind. She put down her book about ancient wars. She had found a new and far more interesting subject to study. She began to watch Jackson Carter. Her quiet, intense scrutiny, a secret she kept even from her mother. She had rejected 100 men who had everything, and she had just found the first man who, in her eyes, seemed to have something that actually mattered. Chloe's study of Jackson Carter became a covert operation, conducted with the meticulous, patient observation of a natural historian studying a rare and fascinating new species. She was a girl who had been raised in a world of surfaces, of polished facades and carefully constructed personas. Jax was a creature of depth, a man whose quiet, disciplined exterior hinted at a vast, uncharted territory within. Her initial observations were focused on his physical presence, his movements. He was a man utterly at ease in his own body, but in a way that was completely alien to the men she knew. The wealthy men in her mother's circle moved with a languid, self-conscious grace, their movements designed to be seen, to project an image of effortless superiority. Jax moved with a profound, unself-conscious efficiency. Every step had a purpose. Every gesture was economical. There was no wasted energy. When he drove the armored sedan, his hands on the wheel were relaxed but ready, his gaze constantly sweeping, not just looking at the road ahead, but reading the entire environment, the traffic patterns, the pedestrians, the reflections in the storefront windows. He was a man in a state of perpetual, low-grade alertness, a human radar system. She began to test him in her own subtle, intelligent way. During their drives to her riding lessons at the exclusive equestrian club, she would pepper him with questions, not about his past, which she knew he would not discuss, but about his observations. "Mr. Carter," she would say, her tone a perfect imitation of a curious, precocious child. "Why did you take that side street? The GPS says the main road is faster." He would answer her without condescension, his voice a low, steady rumble. "The main road has a construction bottleneck 2 miles ahead, Chloe, and there's a protest scheduled at the State House at noon. The overflow traffic will gridlock the entire downtown area. This route is 17% slower, but it's 100% more predictable. In my line of work, predictable is better than fast." He was not just a driver, he was a logistician, a strategist. He saw the city not as a map, but as a living, dynamic system of potential threats and obstacles. He was teaching her, without even realizing it, how to see the world through a soldier's eyes. Her mother, Eleanor, began to notice the change in her daughter, though she did not at first understand its source. The quiet, often sullen girl who had to be coaxed into conversation was suddenly more engaged, more observant. She seemed happier. Eleanor attributed it to a new phase of adolescence, a welcome blossoming of her daughter's personality. She also noticed, with a faint, detached sense of approval, how profoundly competent her new driver was. He was a silent, efficient presence in their lives, anticipating their needs before they were even voiced. The car was always ready, the route always planned, every detail of their movements managed with a seamless, military precision. He was the most capable employee she had ever had, but he was still just an employee, a part of the vast, complex machinery of her life. She saw his competence, his discipline. She did not yet see the man. Chloe, however, was beginning to. The true test, the moment that elevated Jax in Chloe's eyes from a fascinating subject of study to something more, something akin to a hero, came on a raw, blustery afternoon in October. Chloe was at her riding lesson. She was an accomplished equestrian, fearless and skilled, and she was training on a new horse, a magnificent but notoriously temperamental Irish thoroughbred named Heir. The horse was a challenge, a fiery, unpredictable spirit, and that was precisely why Chloe was drawn to him. She was in the outdoor ring, guiding Aries through a series of complex jumps when a sudden, violent squall rolled in from the coast. The sky turned a dark, bruised grey, and a clap of thunder, so loud and so close it seemed to shake the very ground, echoed across the manicured fields. Aries, already high-strung, panicked. He reared, his powerful front legs kicking at the sky, his eyes wide with animal terror. Chloe, caught off guard, was thrown, her small body landing hard on the damp, soft earth of the ring. The fall was not a bad one. She was winded, bruised, but not seriously injured. The real danger was the horse. Aries, now completely consumed by his panic, began to bolt, galloping wildly, blindly around the ring. Her trainer, a portly, well-meaning but ultimately ineffectual man, shouted useless instructions from the safety of the fence. A stable hand tried to run into the ring to catch the horse's reins, but Aries, in his terror, was a multi-ton projectile of pure, instinctual fear, and the boy wisely scrambled back to safety. Chloe, still on the ground, trying to catch her breath, was in the direct path of the crazed, stampeding animal. Jax had been waiting by the car, as he always did, a silent, patient sentinel. He had seen the entire incident unfold, and just as he had done on the day of the construction accident with Seraphina's son, he did not hesitate. He did not wait for permission. He acted. He vaulted the white 4-foot fence of the riding ring in a single, fluid, athletic movement. He was in the ring, moving with a calm, deliberate purpose that was a stark, stunning contrast to the chaos around him. He did not run at the horse. He did not shout. He began to walk in a slow, calm, intercepting arc, his body language a study in non-threatening confidence. He was talking to the horse, his voice a low, steady, calming murmur, the same voice Chloe had heard him use to navigate them through a traffic jam. "Easy now, boy," he was saying. "Easy, big fellow. It's just noise, just a little noise. You're all right. "You're all right." He was not a horseman, but he was a soldier. He understood fear. He knew how to de-escalate a volatile situation, how to project an aura of absolute unshakable calm that could pacify a terrified animal or a terrified man. Ares, still galloping, began to react to the calm, steady presence in his path. His wild, panicked flight began to slow. He was still afraid, but the man's quiet confidence was an anchor in the storm of his terror. Jax continued to walk, to talk, until he was just a few feet away from the still trembling, magnificent animal. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out his hand, not for the reins, but for the horse's neck, a gesture of reassurance, not of control. Ares flinched, but he did not bolt. Jax's hand rested on the horse's neck, his touch firm and steady. He began to stroke the horse, his low, murmuring voice a constant, soothing current. "There now," he whispered. "See, it's all over. The storm is passing." From the ground, Chloe watched, mesmerized. She saw not just a man calming a horse. She saw a warrior, a man of immense, quiet strength, taming a force of pure, chaotic nature, not with brute force, but with courage, with patience, with empathy. He was, in that moment, the embodiment of every hero she had ever read about in her books of ancient wars. He was Achilles, but with a quiet gentleness. He was Odysseus, but with a simple, direct honesty. After a few long moments, the horse was still, his trembling subsiding, his head lowered in a gesture of exhausted trust. Only then did Jax take the reins. He led the magnificent animal, now as docile as a lamb, over to the side of the ring. He then walked over to Chloe, his face a mask of calm, professional concern. He knelt beside her, just as the hero in her books would kneel before his queen. "Are you all right, Chloe?" he asked, his voice full of a genuine, unfeigned warmth. "I think so," she whispered, her gaze fixed on his face, her young heart filled with a profound, overwhelming sense of awe and admiration. He gently, expertly checked her for injuries, his large hands surprisingly gentle as they probed her arms and legs. "Nothing seems to be broken," he concluded, "but we're going to get you to a doctor, just to be sure." He then scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her out of the ring, past the stunned, ineffectual trainer and the gawking stable hands. As he carried her, her head resting against the solid, reassuring strength of his chest, Chloe knew with the absolute, unshakable certainty of a 14-year-old girl who had just witnessed an act of true heroism that she had found him. She had found the one, the man who was worthy, the man she would accept, not as a suitor for her mother, but as something more, something she had not allowed herself to even hope for, a father. The drive to the exclusive private clinic that served Boston's elite was conducted in a profound, vibrating silence. Chloe sat in the back of the sedan, wrapped in a warm blanket Jax had retrieved from the car's emergency kit, her initial shock giving way to a quiet, contemplative awe. She watched the back of his head, the disciplined line of his neck, the calm, competent way his hands held the steering wheel. He had not spoken of what had happened in the riding ring. He had not boasted. He had not drawn attention to his own heroism. He had simply assessed the situation, neutralized the threat, secured the asset, her, and proceeded with the mission, which was now to get her medical attention. His humility was, to Chloe, more impressive than the act of bravery itself. The men she knew, men like Sterling Ashford, would have dined out on a story like that for weeks, embellishing it, using it as a social currency to enhance their own prestige. Jax treated it as if it were just another part of his job, a task that had needed doing, which he had done. It was the quiet, profound professionalism of a true warrior. When they arrived at the clinic, he escorted her in, his presence a silent, formidable shield against the curious stares of the staff. He handled the admitting process with a calm, quiet authority that brooked no argument, providing the necessary insurance information from a file he kept on his phone, his answers to the nurse's questions concise and accurate. He had already, in the car, called Eleanor's personal assistant to inform her of the situation, a model of efficient, clear communication that minimized panic and maximized information. While Chloe was being examined by a doctor, Jax did not sit in the comfortable, leather-appointed waiting room. He stood, his back to the wall, by the door of her examination room, a silent, unmoving sentinel. He was not just her driver, he was her guardian, her protector, and Chloe, from her seat on the examination table, could feel his presence through the closed door, a steady, reassuring weight that made her feel, for the first time in a very long time, completely and utterly safe. Eleanor Vance arrived in a controlled whirlwind of maternal terror. She swept into the clinic, her usual formidable composure a thin, brittle veneer over the fierce, primal fear of a mother who has been told her child is hurt. She rushed to Chloe's side, her hands fluttering over her, checking for injuries, her eyes wide with a desperate, loving concern. "Are you all right, darling? The doctor said you're just bruised. Is anything broken? Tell me the truth." "I'm fine, Mother," Chloe said, her voice calm, a stark contrast to her mother's frantic energy. "It was just a fall. Jax took care of everything." The simple, matter-of-fact way she said his name, the quiet, absolute trust in her voice, was not lost on Eleanor. She turned her attention for the first time to the large, quiet man standing by the door. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice a mixture of gratitude and the sharp, assessing tone of an employer demanding a full report. "Tell me exactly what happened." Jax gave his report in the same way he had driven the car, with a calm, dispassionate precision that stripped the event of all drama and emotion. He recounted the facts, the sudden storm, the horse's panic, Chloe's fall, his intervention. He did not use words like brave or heroic. He used the sterile, objective language of an after-action report. He made it sound like a simple mechanical procedure. But Eleanor, a woman who had spent her life reading people, reading between the lines of carefully constructed corporate reports, heard what he was not saying. She heard the immense, understated courage in his description. She looked at her daughter, who was watching Jax with a look of pure, unadulterated adoration, and she looked at this quiet, formidable man who seemed so utterly unaware of the profound impact he had just had on their lives. And for the first time, she saw him not as an employee, not as a highly competent piece of the machinery of her life. She saw him as a man of a character and a caliber that was so completely and utterly absent from her own rarefied world. The incident at the riding club became a quiet, pivotal moment in the life of the Vance household. Chloe's quiet admiration for Jax blossomed into a full-blown, though still unspoken, bond. She began to seek out his company, not just in the car, but at home. She would find him in the security office, a small, high-tech command center in a discreet wing of the house, and would sit quietly doing her homework while he monitored the surveillance feeds. She would ask him questions, not about his past, but about his world. She learned about situational awareness, about threat assessment, about the quiet, constant vigilance that was his life's creed. He, in turn, found in her a surprisingly astute and intelligent pupil. He would answer her questions with a simple, direct honesty, never patronizing her, always treating her as an equal. He found himself, to his own surprise, looking forward to their quiet, studious companionship. This strange, brilliant, and deeply serious little girl, with her old woman's eyes and her fierce, uncompromising heart, was beginning to find a way past the walls he had built around himself. He had spent his life protecting things, a position, a convoy, a secret. He had never had a person to protect, a person he truly cared about, and he was beginning to realize with a sense of quiet, dawning terror that he cared about this girl deeply. Eleanor watched this strange, evolving relationship with a mixture of fascination, gratitude, and a growing, unsettling sense of her own inadequacy. She saw the way her daughter's face would light up when Jax entered a room. She heard the easy, comfortable way they would talk, their conversations a quiet, meandering stream of shared observations. She saw the way Chloe, who had always been so guarded and withdrawn, would sometimes in an unconscious gesture lean against Jax when he was standing near her, a simple physical expression of a trust and affection she had never shown to any other man, including her own father. And a painful, uncomfortable question began to form in Eleanor's mind. What was this man giving her daughter that she, with all her wealth, all her power, all her fierce maternal love, could not? Jax, the quiet, humble soldier, seemed to be providing Chloe with something essential that had been missing from her life. A sense of safety, yes, but also a sense of reality, a connection to a world that was not curated, not polished, not designed for her comfort. He was a piece of the real, hard, and often dangerous world, and his presence in their lives was like a window being opened in a beautiful, suffocating, and hermetically sealed room. The final, undeniable proof of the bond between them came in the form of a crisis, not of physical danger, but of emotional betrayal. Eleanor, in a moment of weakness, of loneliness, had agreed to go to a charity gala with Sterling Ashford IV, the hedge fund titan Chloe so thoroughly despised. It was not a romantic decision, it was a strategic one. Ashford was a powerful business ally, and a public appearance with him would quell some of the persistent, annoying rumors about her reclusive social life. She knew Chloe would not approve, so, for the first time, she was not entirely honest with her daughter. She told her she was attending the event with a group of business associates. But Chloe, with her sharp, analytical mind and her now finely honed skills of observation, skills Jax himself had taught her, knew her mother was lying. She saw the way her mother avoided her gaze. She saw the telltale signs of a deception she was now trained to recognize. The night of the gala, Chloe waited up. And when her mother returned, escorted to the door by a smirking, triumphant Sterling Ashford, Chloe was there, waiting in the grand foyer, her small form a pillar of silent, righteous fury. The confrontation that followed was quiet, but devastating. "You lied to me," Chloe said, her voice a low, trembling accusation after Sterling had departed. "He is a weak man, Mother, a man of no character, and you stood beside him and smiled and pretended he was worthy of you. You pretended to be something you are not." "Chloe, it's more complicated than that," Eleanor began, her usual formidable authority deserting her in the face of her daughter's raw, emotional honesty. "There are business considerations." "There is only one consideration," Chloe shot back, her voice rising with a passion her mother had never heard before. "Honor, it is the only thing that matters, and you compromised yours tonight, for him." With that, she turned and ran, not to her room, but to the one place in the house she now considered her sanctuary. She ran to the security office. She found Jax there, as she knew she would, a silent, steady presence in the heart of the night. She ran to him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to be a child. She threw her arms around his waist and buried her face in his jacket, her small body racked with the sobs of a girl whose hero, her own mother, had just disappointed her. Jax, stunned, stood frozen for a moment. Then his own deep protective instincts took over. He gently, hesitantly put his arms around her, his large hand resting on the back of her head. He did not speak. He did not offer empty platitudes or easy comfort. He just held her, a silent, solid, unshakable rock in the storm of her adolescent heartbreak. He was not her father. He was not her friend. He was just there, a man of quiet, simple, and profound honor. And in that moment, Eleanor, who had followed her daughter and was now standing unseen in the doorway, watching this scene unfold, finally understood. She had been searching for a suitable man, a man of power and wealth, to be a partner for her. But her daughter had been searching for something else entirely, a man of character, a man of honor, a man to be a father. And she, in her blind, arrogant pursuit of what was suitable, had been completely, utterly, and devastatingly wrong. The scene in the security office acted as a catalyst, shattering the carefully constructed denial Eleanor had built around her emotional life. Seeing her weeping daughter find solace not in her own arms, but in the quiet, steady embrace of an employee was a moment of humbling, painful clarity. She had been so focused on managing her empire, on curating a perfect, protected life for her daughter, that she had failed to see the profound emotional void that had opened between them. She had been providing for Chloe, but she had not been truly connecting with her. Jax, the quiet man in the background, had managed to do in a few short months what she had failed to do in years. He had earned her daughter's absolute, unconditional trust. He had become Chloe's emotional North Star. As she stood in the shadows of the hallway, a silent, unseen observer, Eleanor felt a complex and unsettling mixture of emotions. There was a pang of jealousy, a mother's natural resentment of anyone who could usurp her place in her child's heart. But beneath it, there was a deeper, more profound sense of gratitude and a dawning, reluctant admiration for the man who had so effortlessly breached her daughter's formidable defenses. She retreated, as was her way, to the cold, analytical sanctuary of her study. She did not deal with the emotional fallout immediately. Instead, she did what she always did when faced with a complex problem. She gathered data. She opened her laptop and pulled up the file on Jackson Carter, the same file her security team had compiled when he was first hired. This time, she read it not as an employer vetting a potential hire, but as a woman, as a mother, trying to understand the man who had become so inexplicably important to her child. The file was sparse, clinical, a collection of facts that only hinted at the story of the man. Born in a rough neighborhood in Detroit, enlisted in the army at 18, rose through the ranks of the special forces with a speed that was almost unheard of. Multiple tours in Afghanistan and other unnamed global hotspots, a string of commendations for valor, for leadership, for actions that were described in heavily redacted, frustratingly vague military jargon. An honorable discharge after 15 years of service with the rank of Master Sergeant. And then a period of quiet, almost invisible civilian life, a series of low-profile security jobs, a small, rented apartment, no family, no close ties. He was a ghost, a man who had walked through the fire and had emerged with his honor intact, but with his connections to the world seemingly severed. She cross-referenced the dates. His last tour, the one that had preceded his discharge, had been particularly brutal. She used her high-level contacts, calling in a favor from a senator who sat on the Armed Services Committee to get a less redacted version of the report from his final mission. The story that emerged was one of quiet, profound heroism and devastating loss. His unit had been ambushed, a catastrophic intelligence failure. Jax had single-handedly held off an overwhelming enemy force while his wounded men were evacuated. He had saved his entire team, but had been grievously wounded in the process. He had come home with a chest full of medals and a body full of shrapnel and ghosts. He had not just left the army, he had been broken by it, and he had sought not fame or fortune, but silence, anonymity. He was not just a competent employee, he was a wounded warrior, a man of immense quiet courage who had sought refuge in the shadows of her own gilded world. And her daughter, with the pure, unerring instinct of a child, had seen the honor and the strength beneath the scars. She had seen the king in hiding, while her mother had only seen the servant. The revelation was a profound, humbling blow to Eleanor's pride. She, who prided herself on her ability to judge character, to see the value in an asset before anyone else, had been completely, utterly blind. She had been so fixated on finding a man who was her equal in wealth and status that she had failed to look for a man who was her equal in character. The next morning, a new, fragile tension filled the grand, silent rooms of the estate. Chloe was quiet and withdrawn, her disappointment in her mother a palpable cold wall between them. Jax was a model of professional discretion, his face an unreadable mask, giving no sign of the dramatic, emotional scene that had unfolded the night before. Eleanor knew that she could not let this new, painful distance fester. She had to act. She had to repair the breach. But for the first time in her life, she did not know how. She could not command her daughter's forgiveness. She could not acquire her trust with a hostile takeover. This was a battle that could not be won with the usual weapons in her arsenal. It required a different kind of strength, a strength she was not sure she possessed, the strength of vulnerability. That afternoon, she did something she had not done in years. She cancelled her appointments. She told her staff she was not to be disturbed, and she went to the stables. She found Chloe there, grooming Aries, her small form moving with a quiet, practiced competence as she curried the horse's magnificent glossy coat. The stables, with their earthy smell of hay and leather, had always been Chloe's sanctuary, the one place where she seemed to be truly, uncomplicatedly happy. For a long time, Eleanor just stood in the doorway watching her daughter. Finally, she spoke. "He's a beautiful horse," she said, her voice quiet, tentative. Chloe did not turn around. "He's a good horse," she replied, her voice cool. "He's just misunderstood. People are afraid of him because he's strong. They don't take the time to see that he's also gentle." The comment, so clearly a metaphor for Jax, was a sharp, well-aimed arrow, and it found its mark in Eleanor's heart. Eleanor walked into the stall, the scent of the horse a nostalgic reminder of her own, long-forgotten childhood. "You're right," she said, her voice a low, unsteady whisper. "About last night. About everything. I was wrong. I was weak. I compromised my own values because it was the easy, convenient thing to do. You were stronger than I was, Chloe. You saw the truth, and you were not afraid to stand by it. I am profoundly sorry, and I am profoundly proud of you." It was the most honest, direct apology she had ever given in her life. It was a complete, unconditional surrender. Chloe finally stopped grooming the horse. She turned to face her mother, her young, intelligent face a mask of careful consideration. She was weighing her mother's words, assessing their sincerity. "Why do you let them in?" Chloe asked, her voice a genuine, curious question. "All those men, Sterling and the others. You're the strongest person I know. Why do you settle for them?" The question, so simple and so piercing, stripped away the last of Eleanor's defenses. "Because I was afraid," she admitted, the confession a painful, liberating release. "After your father died, I was so afraid of being alone, and I thought the right man, a man of our world, would be the safe choice, the logical choice. I was thinking like a CEO, not like a woman, not like a mother. I was trying to fill a space in our lives with a suitable asset. I forgot that what I need, is not an asset. It's a partner, a man of character, a man like Jax." The name, spoken aloud in this context, hung in the air between them, a fragile, shimmering thing. Chloe's expression softened, the last of her anger dissolving, replaced by a look of profound, intuitive understanding. "I know," she said softly, and in those two simple words, a new, unspoken alliance was forged between them. They were no longer just mother and daughter. They were two women, two allies, who had finally come to the same undeniable conclusion. If the profound, quiet journey of this mother and daughter toward understanding and truth has touched your heart, a super thanks is the most powerful way to support our mission of telling these unforgettable stories of the human spirit. The conversation in the stables marked a tectonic shift in the emotional landscape of the Vance estate. The Cold War between mother and daughter was over, replaced by a new, tentative, and unspoken partnership. Eleanor, having finally acknowledged the truth of her own heart and the even more undeniable truth of her daughter's, was now faced with a new and infinitely more complex strategic problem. How does a woman like her, a woman who is a queen in her own world, pursue a man who is, in the eyes of that world, a servant? How does she bridge the chasm of class, wealth, and power that separated them, a chasm that was largely of her own making? She could not simply summon him to her study and declare her feelings. The power imbalance was too great. Such a move would be a form of coercion, a command, not an invitation. It would put Jax, a man of profound and quiet pride, in an impossible position. She knew instinctively that he would never cross that line himself. His sense of duty, his professional honor was too deeply ingrained. He would see it as a betrayal of the trust she had placed in him, a violation of his role as her protector. If anything was to happen, she would have to be the one to create the opportunity, to change the very nature of the terrain on which they both stood. Her first move was a subtle but significant one. She began to dismantle the formal, rigid barriers that had always defined their relationship. She started with small, deliberate acts of inclusion. Instead of having her assistant relay her schedule to Jax each morning, she began to do it herself. A brief, face-to-face meeting in the security office. These meetings, ostensibly about logistics, became a space for a more personal connection. She would ask him about his night, about the book he was reading, about his opinion on a news story. She was signaling to him, in the only way she knew how, that she saw him not just as a functionary, but as a person, as an equal. Jax, for his part, was a man trained to read the subtlest of signals, to detect the slightest shift in a pattern. He noticed the change immediately. He was wary at first, his professional guard firmly in place. He kept his answers brief, respectful, his demeanor a model of professional decorum. He did not know what this new, friendlier posture from his employer meant, but his training had taught him to be suspicious of any change in the behavior of a powerful figure. He did not yet allow himself to hope. Chloe, now a willing and enthusiastic co-conspirator, played her own crucial role in the campaign. She began to create opportunities for them all to be together in a more relaxed, familial setting. She would insist that Jax join them for the informal late-night snacks they sometimes had in the large, comfortable family kitchen. "Jax has been on his feet all day, Mother," she would say, her voice a perfect blend of childish innocence and unassailable logic. "It's not right for him to eat a sandwich alone in the security office while we're having ice cream." Eleanor would, of course, agree. And so, Jax would find himself sitting at the large, rustic wooden table in the Vance's family kitchen, a place that was, in its own way, more intimate and more exclusive than the grand, formal dining room. He would sit, stiff and uncomfortable at first, a soldier in a foreign land, while Chloe chattered on about her day, and Eleanor watched them both, her face a mask of quiet, careful observation. Slowly, tentatively, the rigid lines of protocol began to blur. He was no longer just the driver, the guard. He was Jax, a quiet, steady, and increasingly essential presence in the fabric of their small, lonely family. The true test of Eleanor's new strategy, the moment that would either shatter their fragile, evolving connection or forge it into something stronger, came in the form of an external threat. A series of anonymous, increasingly menacing letters began to arrive at her office. They were rambling, incoherent screeds filled with a paranoid, resentful rage against her wealth, her power, her very existence. The corporate security team dismissed them as the work of a harmless crank, a common nuisance for any high-profile public figure. But Jax, when Eleanor showed him the letters, saw something more. He saw a pattern. He saw a specific, escalating obsession. "This isn't a crank," he said, his voice a low, serious growl as he studied the letters in the quiet of her study. "This is a predator. He's testing our defenses. He's watching you, and his language is becoming more specific, more violent. This is the stage before an attack." His assessment sent a chill of real, cold fear through Eleanor. She had lived her life surrounded by a fortress of security, and she realized, become complacent, lulled into a false sense of safety. Jax immediately took command of the situation. He did not panic. He became the master sergeant he had once been, a calm, focused, and utterly competent commander in the face of a new and credible threat. He and his small, hand-picked team from the bunker began a quiet, intensive investigation, bypassing the slower, more bureaucratic corporate security channels. They analyzed the letters, the paper, the postmarks. They cross-referenced the language with databases of known threats, and they began a 24/7 close protection detail on Eleanor and Chloe. For the next week, Jax was a constant, silent shadow at Eleanor's side. He drove her to and from the office. He stood, a quiet, imposing presence, in the back of her board meetings. He escorted her through the secure underground tunnels that connected her office building to her private parking garage. This new, enforced proximity was a crucible, burning away the last of the professional distance between them. They were no longer just employer and employee, or even just friends. They were a commander and her most trusted soldier, united against a common enemy. In the long, quiet hours they spent together, in the car, in the elevator, in the silent, late-night vigils at the estate, their conversations deepened. She saw the full, formidable extent of his intelligence, his strategic mind, his profound, intuitive understanding of human nature. He, in turn, saw the immense, crushing weight of the responsibility she carried, the loneliness of her command. He saw her courage, her refusal to be intimidated, her fierce, unwavering resolve to protect her company, her family. Their mutual respect, already deep, blossomed into a profound, undeniable admiration. They were two sides of the same coin, two lonely, powerful souls who had, by a strange twist of fate, found their perfect, complementary match. The breakthrough in the investigation came from Jax's own, painstaking analysis. He noticed a small, seemingly insignificant detail in the letters. The writer had used a slightly archaic, unusual turn of phrase, a phrase that was common in a very specific and very exclusive academic circle in Boston in the 1980s. It was a long shot, a gut instinct, but Jax had learned to trust his gut. He had his hacker, Nix, begin to cross-reference the alumni databases of Boston's most elite universities from that era, with lists of individuals with a history of grievances against the Vance family or their company. The search yielded a single, chilling result: a man named Alistair Finch. He had been a brilliant but deeply unstable professor of economic theory, a man who had been a rising star until he had been publicly and humiliatingly discredited by Eleanor's own father for a piece of flawed, radical research. Finch had lost his tenure, his career, his reputation. He had become a recluse, a ghost, a man consumed by a 30-year-old grudge, a burning, obsessive hatred for the Vance family. The final, damning piece of evidence was a recent photograph of Finch, a gaunt, haunted-looking man taken by a security camera in a coffee shop across the street from Eleanor's office building. He had been watching her for weeks. The threat was no longer anonymous. It had a name, a face, and a motive. Jax presented his findings to Eleanor in the quiet of her study. He laid out the file, the photographs, the psychological profile. "He's escalating," Jax concluded, his voice grim. "He's been humiliated, and he wants to humiliate you. He wants to take away the thing you value most. It's not about money, it's about Chloe." The name, spoken with such cold, clinical finality, was a punch to Eleanor's gut. The threat was not to her, it was to her child. In that moment, the last of her reserve, the last of her carefully constructed walls, came crashing down. She looked at this man, this quiet, brilliant soldier who had seen the danger she had been blind to, who had worked tirelessly to protect her daughter. He was not just her employee, he was her partner, her equal, her shield. "What do we do?" she whispered, the question not from a CEO to her security chief, but from a terrified woman to the one man in the world she trusted. Jax looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed the deep, protective emotion he felt for her to show in his eyes. "We set a trap," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, "and we finish this together." The plan Jax devised was a classic piece of asymmetric warfare, a strategy that relied not on brute force, but on intelligence, deception, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the enemy's psychology. Alistair Finch, he reasoned, was not a common criminal. He was an academic, a man who saw himself as a wronged intellectual, a victim of the Vances' arrogant corporate power. His attack, therefore, would not be a simple, brutish act of violence. It would be symbolic. It would be theatrical. It would be designed to strike at the very heart of Eleanor's world, to prove his intellectual superiority, to humiliate her in the one arena she could not control, the safety of her child. "He won't make his move here at the estate," Jax explained, his finger tracing the layout of the sprawling property on a blueprint spread across Eleanor's desk. "The security is too overt, too much of a fortress. A direct assault doesn't fit his profile. It's not elegant enough. He'll choose a softer target, a place where you feel safe, but where the security is less visible. He wants to make a point, to show you that your fortress is an illusion, that he can get to you anywhere." Their gaze, simultaneously, fell upon the same date on Eleanor's calendar, circled in red. The annual Founders' Day Gala at the Boston Athenaeum, one of the oldest and most exclusive private libraries in the country. It was the absolute pinnacle of the Boston Brahmin social calendar, an event Eleanor's family had patronized for generations. It was a place of old-world charm, of quiet, intellectual snobbery, a place that reeked of the very academic establishment that had cast Finch out. It was the perfect stage for his revenge. And the highlight of the evening, a tradition that had been in place for decades, was a brief, charming address to the assembled patrons by the youngest member of the Vance family. This year, for the first time, that honor would fall to Chloe. "He'll try to get to her there," Jax said, his voice a low, certain growl. "During the speech, in front of everyone. It's the ultimate humiliation. He'll prove that he can breach the heart of your world and take your most precious asset, all while you are surrounded by the trappings of your power." The thought was so chilling, so diabolically plausible, that Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. Her first instinct, the primal maternal urge, was to cancel, to lock herself and Chloe away in the estate, to hide until the threat was gone. "No," Jax said, his eyes locking with hers, his gaze firm, almost commanding. "We don't hide. We don't let him dictate the terms of the engagement. We know his plan. That gives us the advantage. We turn his chosen battlefield into our killing ground. We let him walk into our trap." The plan was a high-stakes gamble, a nerve-wracking piece of theater. They would proceed with the gala as if nothing was wrong. Chloe would give her speech. Eleanor would play the part of the proud, confident matriarch. But behind the scenes, Jax and his team would be in complete control. For the 2 weeks leading up to the event, Jax transformed from a security consultant into a field commander. The bunker in the sub-basement of the Vance estate became a tactical operations center. He and his team of misfits, Nix, the hacker, the ex-marine locksmith, the social engineer, worked around the clock. They obtained the Athenaeum's blueprints, its security protocols, its staff lists. Nix, with a few keystrokes, gained complete control of the library's ancient, outdated security camera system, creating blind spots for their own team and hidden digital tripwires for their target. The locksmith spent a night in the library under the guise of a security upgrade, mapping every lock, every maintenance tunnel, every forgotten, dusty storage room. The most crucial and most dangerous part of the plan involved Chloe. She could not just be the bait. She had to be an active, willing participant in the operation. Eleanor was terrified, her maternal instincts screaming in protest at the thought of putting her child in any conceivable danger. But it was Chloe herself who insisted. Jax, in a quiet, serious meeting with both of them, had laid out the plan, explaining the risks and the protocols with the same calm, direct honesty he used for everything. He did not treat Chloe like a child. He treated her like a soldier, a member of the team, and she had risen to the occasion, her young face a mask of a quiet, steely resolve that was a mirror of her mother's. "I'm not afraid," she had said, her gaze steady. "I trust you, Jax. I know you won't let anything happen to me." The simple, absolute faith in her voice was a weight of responsibility so profound it was almost a physical blow to Jax. He would not fail this girl. He would die before he let anyone lay a hand on her. The night of the gala, the Boston Athenaeum was a glittering jewel box of old money and intellectual prestige. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, beeswax, and expensive perfume. Eleanor Vance moved through the crowd, a vision of regal grace in a midnight blue gown, her smile warm, her demeanor relaxed. No one could have guessed that her heart was pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. Chloe, in a simple, elegant white dress, stood by her mother's side, her composure so absolute, so unnervingly calm, that she seemed more like a miniature queen than a 14-year-old girl. And in the shadows, a ghost in a perfectly tailored tuxedo was Jax. To the casual observer, he was just another anonymous security man, his face a mask of polite professional boredom, but his eyes were constantly moving, scanning, assessing. He was connected by a discreet, nearly invisible earpiece to his team, who were scattered throughout the building, posing as waiters, technicians, and even guests. The library was a web, and Alistair Finch was the fly they were waiting for. The moment of truth came, as Jax had predicted, just as Chloe was about to be introduced. Nix's voice, a calm, dispassionate whisper in his ear, said, "He's in. Maintenance tunnel, 3rd floor, moving toward the rear staircase." Finch had bypassed the main security, just as they had known he would, using his old, intimate knowledge of the building's hidden passages. He was making his way to the small, private alcove directly behind the podium where Chloe would be speaking. His plan, they had surmised, was to emerge during her speech, to grab her, to create a moment of pure, public chaos and terror. Jax gave a quiet, verbal command into his wrist microphone. "Team B, seal the exits. Team A, converge on my position." On my mark, he began to move, not with a panicked rush, but with the same silent, fluid efficiency with which he had once cleared a hostile building. He melted into the shadows of a towering bookshelf, his path intersecting the one Finch would have to take. Eleanor, on stage, her heart in her throat, began her introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice a model of maternal pride. "It gives me immense pleasure to introduce my daughter, Chloe Vance." Chloe walked to the podium, her small form poised and confident under the warm glow of the spotlight. She began her speech, her voice clear and strong. She was the bait, and she was playing her part to perfection. As she spoke, Jack saw him, Alistair Finch. He emerged from a small, unmarked door behind a tapestry, a gaunt, wild-eyed figure in a rumpled suit. He was holding not a gun, but a small, wicked-looking knife, its blade gleaming in the dim light. His eyes were fixed on Chloe, a look of feverish, triumphant madness on his face. He took a step forward, into the open, and then Jax was there. He moved from the shadows like a panther, a silent, black-clad spectre of absolute terrifying violence. Finch never even had a chance to react. Jax's hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a precise, economical strike to the man's wrist, the sound of bone cracking sickeningly loud in the quiet space. The knife clattered to the floor. In the same fluid motion, Jax had Finch's arm twisted behind his back, his body slammed against the wall, his face pressed into the plaster. It was over in less than 2 seconds, a brutal, silent, and utterly definitive neutralization of the threat. The 2 other members of his team were there a second later, securing the now sobbing, whimpering man. On the stage, Chloe had not even faltered in her speech. The entire violent ballet had taken place in the shadows, completely unseen by the audience. Eleanor, who had been watching the shadows, not her daughter, saw the entire thing. She saw the flash of movement, the controlled, lethal grace of the man she loved as he moved to protect her child. She saw him not just as a hero, but as a warrior, a guardian, a man who was willing to walk into the darkness to keep them safe. Her heart, which had been frozen with terror, now swelled with a feeling of love and gratitude so powerful it was almost painful. After the gala, after the police had quietly, discreetly taken Finch away, after the last of the guests had departed, the 3 of them, Eleanor, Chloe, and Jax, stood alone in the grand, silent reading room of the Athenaeum. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a profound sense of shared, triumphant relief. Chloe, her duty done, her courage proven, finally allowed herself to be a child. She ran to Jax and hugged him, her small arms wrapped tightly around his waist. "I knew you would be there," she whispered. Eleanor walked over to them, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She looked at this quiet, formidable man and at her brave, brilliant daughter. They were not a traditional family. They were a team, a platoon of 3 who had just won their first, most important battle. She laid her hand on Jax's arm, her touch a quiet, profound acknowledgement of everything he was, of everything he had become to them. "Let's go home," she said, her voice full of a warmth and a promise that had been absent for 5 long years. "All of us." The return to the Chestnut Hill estate that night was not a return to the old order. The invisible yet unbreachable walls that had separated their roles, their worlds, had been definitively and permanently shattered by the shared crucible of the night's events. The car, a silent, gliding capsule of safety, moved through the sleeping city, but the atmosphere inside was charged with a new, unspoken intimacy. Jax was in the driver's seat, his professional mask back in place, but the rigid formality was gone, replaced by the quiet, easy presence of a man who was no longer just an employee, but a comrade, a member of the family. Eleanor sat in the back, with Chloe's head resting in her lap, the young girl having finally succumbed to a deep, exhausted sleep. Eleanor's hand rested on her daughter's hair, a gesture of maternal comfort, but her gaze was fixed on the back of Jax's head, on the strong, steady line of his neck. He was a man who had, in the space of a few months, become the absolute center of their small, fragile universe. He had not just protected them, he had healed them. He had healed the breach between mother and daughter, and he had, without even trying, begun to heal the long, lonely ache in Eleanor's own heart. When they arrived at the estate, the usual, formal routine of their homecoming was abandoned. Instead of disappearing into his separate quarters, Jax helped Eleanor carry the sleeping Chloe upstairs to her room. They moved together in a practiced, silent rhythm, 2 parents putting their child to bed. He laid her gently on her bed, and Eleanor pulled the covers over her, her touch infinitely tender. They stood for a moment, side by side, in the dim, soft light of the child's bedroom, looking down at her peaceful, sleeping face. The shared, quiet intimacy of the moment was more profound, more real than anything Eleanor had ever experienced with another man. "Thank you, Jackson," she whispered, her voice a low, unsteady murmur in the quiet room. She used his full name for the first time, a deliberate, conscious shift in their dynamic, not just for tonight, for everything. "It's my job, Eleanor," he replied, his own voice a low, rough rumble. He used her name too. The final barrier had fallen. "No," she said, turning to face him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "It's more than that. You know it is." He could not deny it. He could not retreat behind the shield of his professional duty, not anymore. The events of the night, the fierce, primal need to protect her and her child, had stripped away the last of his own defenses. He had allowed himself to care, and that admission, to a man like him, was a profound and terrifying surrender. He looked at her, at this brilliant, powerful and deeply vulnerable woman, and he saw not his employer, not a billionaire queen in her castle, but the woman he had, against all logic, against all his training, fallen in love with. The silence in the room stretched, thick with all the things they had never said, all the feelings they had so carefully suppressed. He was a soldier, a man of action, not of words. He did not know how to navigate this new, treacherous emotional terrain, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second, and gently, reverently, tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The simple, chaste touch was an explosion, a silent, powerful detonation of all the pent-up emotion between them. In that single, gentle gesture, he was saying everything he could not articulate. "I see you. I care for you. I will protect you." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, a silent, complete surrender. "Stay," she whispered, the single word a plea, an invitation, a command. "Don't go back to your room tonight. Stay with me." They walked, not touching, but connected by an invisible, powerful current, to her own private wing of the house, a vast, elegant suite of rooms that had always felt cold and empty to her, a place where she had always felt most alone. But tonight, with him by her side, it felt for the first time like a sanctuary. Their coming together was not a repeat of the passionate, desperate kiss they had shared on that first rainy night. This was different. This was a quiet, solemn, and deeply intentional act. It was the sealing of a pact, the formal, physical acknowledgement of a bond that had been forged in shared danger and mutual respect. It was a quiet, profound homecoming for two lonely, guarded souls who had, against all odds, found their missing half in the most unlikely of places. The days and weeks that followed were a period of quiet, profound change for the new, unofficially formed family of three. The world outside, of course, did not know. Alistair Finch's arrest was a minor news story, reported as the foiling of a potential disturbance at a high society event, with the details of his obsession and Jax's role in his capture carefully, deliberately kept from the press. To the world, Jackson Carter was still just Eleanor Vance's head of security, but within the private, protected walls of the Chestnut Hill estate, he was something more. He was a partner, a confidant, a co-commander of their small domestic world. He and Eleanor did not make a grand public declaration of their relationship. It simply settled into a new, comfortable reality. He moved, unofficially at first, and then permanently, into a suite of rooms in her wing of the house. They began to share their lives, not just their nights. He became a constant, steady presence in Chloe's life. He was not trying to be her father. He was simply Jax. He was the one who helped her with her physics homework, his logical, strategic mind surprisingly adept at explaining complex equations. He was the one who taught her how to change a tire on her mother's vintage sports car, believing that self-sufficiency was a more valuable skill for a young woman than learning needlepoint. He was the one she came to with her fears, her triumphs, her quiet, adolescent heartbreaks. He never offered easy answers or sentimental advice. He would just listen, his gaze steady and respectful, and ask the one quiet, insightful question that would help her to find her own answer. He was teaching her, by his quiet, powerful example, what it meant to be a person of honor, of integrity, of quiet strength. And for Chloe, who had for so long been surrounded by the noise and artifice of wealth, his quiet, authentic presence was the greatest gift she had ever received. Eleanor, for her part, found herself in a state of quiet, bewildered bliss. She was a woman who had spent her entire life in control, managing, directing, commanding. With Jax, she learned for the first time how to let go. She learned to trust, to delegate not just professional tasks, but emotional ones. He became her sounding board, her partner in the truest sense of the word. They would spend their evenings in her study, not with her as the CEO and him as the subordinate, but as two equals, two powerful minds dissecting the world, her with her deep, intuitive understanding of finance and power, him with his profound, hard-won understanding of human nature and conflict. He did not defer to her, and he was not intimidated by her. He would challenge her assumptions, question her motives, and force her to see the world from a different, more grounded perspective. He made her a better leader, a better strategist, and a better, more compassionate human being. The love between them was a quiet, powerful thing, a deep, steady river that ran beneath the surface of their lives, nourishing them, strengthening them, making them more than they had been on their own. They were a team, a formidable, unbeatable partnership. But the world that existed outside the gates of their private Eden, was not built to accommodate such an unconventional alliance. And the final, most difficult battle was yet to come. It would be a battle not against an external threat, but against the deeply ingrained prejudices and expectations of their own rarefied world. The idyllic private world they had built for themselves was a fortress, but even the strongest fortress cannot remain isolated forever. The outside world, with its rigid rules and unforgiving judgments, began to intrude, not with a dramatic frontal assault, but with a series of small, subtle incursions. The first came from within Eleanor's own family. Her parents, the elder Vances, titans of old Boston society, began to hear the whispers. They were people for whom appearances were not just important, they were everything. The idea that their daughter, the CEO of a global empire, the keeper of the family's formidable legacy, was involved in a relationship with her hired help, and a black man at that, was not just inappropriate, it was an existential threat to their entire worldview. They summoned Eleanor to their ancestral home on Beacon Hill, a cold, museum-like mansion where the air itself seemed to be thick with the weight of judgment. The confrontation was not a screaming match. It was a quiet, brutal exercise in emotional blackmail. "Eleanor, you must understand the position you are putting this family in," her father, a stern, imposing patriarch, began, his voice a low, disappointed rumble. "There are standards. There are expectations. A woman of your stature cannot afford a dalliance, especially not with a man of his background." The word background was a carefully chosen euphemism, a polite patrician veil over a deep and ugly prejudice. "He is not a dalliance, father," Eleanor replied, her voice a quiet, steely blade. "He is a man of honor, a man of courage. He is the best man I have ever known." "He is your employee," her mother interjected, her voice thin and sharp. "A security guard. Think of the scandal. Think of the company. The board will not stand for it. You are the face of Vance Global. You are a symbol, and you are tarnishing that symbol with this inappropriate attachment." They were not concerned for her happiness. They were concerned for their stock price, for their social standing, for the pristine, unblemished narrative of their dynasty. They were asking her to choose the family, the company, the legacy, or the man. It was a choice, she realized with a sickening clarity, that they would never have asked a man to make. She left the meeting not bowed, but filled with a cold, righteous fury. She had spent her entire life living up to their expectations, carrying the immense, crushing weight of their legacy. She had sacrificed her own youth, her own desires, her own happiness, on the altar of their ambition. No more. Their ultimatum had not intimidated her, it had liberated her. She would not choose. She would have it all. She would have her company, her daughter, and the man she loved. And if her world, the world of old money and quiet prejudice, could not accept that, then she would build a new world. But the battle was not just a social one. It had a practical, legal, and incredibly dangerous front. A small, obscure clause in the Vance global corporate bylaws, a clause her own grandfather had written decades ago to prevent a hostile takeover, required the CEO to be married, or if single, to maintain a personal life that is beyond reproach and in keeping with the company's public image. It was an archaic, sexist, and legally dubious clause, but it was there, a loaded gun in the hands of her enemies. And Charles Worthington, her old rival on the board, the man who had been humiliated by her defense of Marcus months earlier, was not a man to forget a grudge. The whispers of her relationship with Jax had reached him, and he saw his opportunity. He began to quietly, methodically, build a coalition among the more conservative members of the board, preparing to challenge her leadership, to use the morality clause to force her out. The pressure began to mount. The whispers became rumors. The rumors became a quiet, sustained campaign against her. Articles began to appear in the financial press, quoting anonymous insiders who expressed concern about the CEO's erratic and unpredictable personal life. Her authority, which had once been absolute, was beginning to erode. She was fighting a war on two fronts: a social war against her own family and their class, and a corporate war against a rival who was determined to destroy her. And at the center of it all was Jax. He saw the toll the battle was taking on her. He saw the strain in her eyes, the new hard lines of exhaustion around her mouth. He was a soldier, and he knew the first and most fundamental rule of protecting a high-value asset. You must not, under any circumstances, become the liability yourself. He was the liability. His presence in her life, the very love that had become her greatest source of strength, was now the weapon being used to destroy her. One night, as they sat in her study, the unspoken tension, a thick, heavy blanket between them, he made a decision. It was the hardest decision of his life, a command decision that was an act of profound, self-sacrificing love. "I have to go, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur, the words a physical pain to speak. She looked at him, her face a mask of shocked, wounded disbelief. "Go where? What are you talking about?" "I'm the problem," he said, his voice flat, his gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the window. "As long as I am here, they will have a weapon to use against you. Worthington, your family, they will not stop until they have broken you. I will not be the reason you lose everything you have built. I will not be the reason Chloe loses her mother." "I am not losing anything," she cried, her voice rising with a desperate, passionate fury. I am choosing you." "No," he said, and his voice was gentle but absolute, the voice of a soldier who has assessed the battlefield and has made the only logical, tactical choice. "You are not choosing me. You are choosing a war you cannot win. You cannot fight the whole world, Eleanor, and you cannot protect your daughter if you are in a constant state of battle. She needs her mother. She needs a world of peace and stability, and I am the storm." He stood up, his movement a final, resolute act. "I have trained your new security team. They are the best. They will keep you safe. I have given them my protocols, my intelligence. The fortress is secure." "I don't care about the fortress," she sobbed, the tears she had held back for so long finally breaking free. "I care about you." He walked to her and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. He looked into her eyes, and his own were full of a deep, profound and heartbreaking love. "I will never be far," he whispered. "I will always be watching. I will always be your guardian, but I cannot be your husband. The world will not allow it, and I love you too much to be the man who destroys you." He pressed a final, gentle kiss to her forehead. "Be the queen they need you to be," he murmured, "and teach your daughter to be a better one." And then he stood, turned, and walked out of the room, out of the penthouse, out of her life. He did not look back. He was a soldier, and he had just performed the ultimate act of duty, a strategic retreat, a sacrifice of his own happiness to ensure the safety of the queen and the future of the kingdom. Jax's departure was not a dramatic exit, it was a ghost disappearance. One moment he was the quiet, solid center of their universe, and the next he was simply gone. He left behind no personal effects, no forwarding address, no trace of his existence except for the perfectly implemented security protocols and the profound, aching void his absence created. For Eleanor, the days that followed were a waking nightmare, a blur of grief and a cold, simmering rage. She moved through her life with a brittle, flawless precision, her public face a mask of unshakable, icy composure. She chaired her board meetings, negotiated her multi-billion-dollar deals, and smiled her cool, serene smile at the charity galas. No one, not even her closest associates, could see the profound, devastating heartbreak that lay beneath the surface. But her fight, her motivation, had changed. She was no longer just protecting her empire, she was avenging the man who had been forced to sacrifice himself for it. Her grief became a quiet, focused, and utterly ruthless weapon. Her first target was Charles Worthington. She did not engage him in a direct emotional confrontation. She dismantled his power base with the cold, silent efficiency of a special forces operation. She used the full, crushing weight of her influence and her intelligence network, a network that Jax himself had helped her to build, to uncover his weaknesses. She found the trail of his secret, highly leveraged and borderline illegal stock trades. She found the evidence of his backroom deals, his quiet betrayals of the company's interests for his own personal gain. She did not expose him in a dramatic public fashion. That was not her style. Instead, she presented him with the evidence in a private, one-on-one meeting in her soundproof office, a meeting from which there was no escape. She laid out his crimes, not with anger, but with the dispassionate clarity of a judge reading a death sentence. She did not fire him, she destroyed him. She gave him a choice, a quiet, immediate resignation for health reasons and a complete divestment of his shares in the company, or a slow, public and legally devastating crucifixion that would not only end his career, but would likely land him in a federal prison. He chose to resign. The king was dead. Her next target was her own family. She did not disown them. She did something far more profound and far more painful. She severed the financial and institutional ties that bound them. She orchestrated a complex but brilliant corporate restructuring, buying out her parents' and other relatives' controlling shares in Vance Global, using her own personal fortune to consolidate her power until it was absolute. She was no longer just the CEO, she was the sole, undisputed ruler of her empire. She then informed her parents that their access to the company's private jets, their seats on the boards of the city's most prestigious charities, their entire, carefully constructed world of influence and privilege, which had always been underwritten by the Vance Global name, was now and forever revoked. She was not just cutting them off, she was exiling them from the kingdom they had once ruled. She was, in a quiet, brutal, and deeply satisfying way, making them irrelevant. The price of their prejudice was the loss of their power, but these victories were hollow. They were battles won in a war whose central, most important objective, a life with the man she loved, seemed to have been lost. The grand, silent estate was a beautiful, gilded prison of her own making. Her only true solace, her only source of genuine, uncomplicated joy, was her daughter. And it was Chloe, in the end, who would lead the final, most important charge. Chloe had been devastated by Jax's departure. She had lost not just a friend, a mentor, but the one and only man she had ever considered to be a father. But her grief, like her mother's, did not manifest as a helpless sorrow. It manifested as a quiet, determined, and deeply intelligent anger. She saw the injustice of it, the quiet, cruel tyranny of a world that would tear apart a good and honorable man for the simple, unforgivable crime of not being born into the right class, the right world. And she, a 14-year-old girl with a brilliant strategic mind that had been honed by a master, began to formulate a plan. She began her campaign not in a boardroom, but at a dinner table. She began to talk to the powerful, influential men and women who were her mother's peers, the titans of industry and finance who moved in their rarefied world. but she did not talk to them as a child. She spoke to them as an equal. She would engage them in conversations about their businesses, about global markets, about their security protocols, her questions sharp, insightful, and informed by a level of knowledge that was both startling and deeply impressive. And she would, in the course of these conversations, always subtly find a way to bring up the name of Jackson Carter. She would tell the story of the day he had saved her at the riding club, not as a tale of a child's adoration, but as a case study in effective risk management. She would talk about his protocols, his strategic insights, his profound understanding of the human element in security. She was, in her own brilliant, understated way, building his legend. She was transforming him in the minds of the most powerful people in her mother's world, from an anonymous security guard into a brilliant, sought-after, and highly respected expert in his field. She was, piece by piece, building a new public identity for him, an identity that would make him not just an acceptable partner for her mother, but a desirable one. The final brilliant move in her campaign came on the occasion of her 15th birthday. It was a large, formal affair, a gathering of the city's most powerful and influential figures at the estate. It was a command performance, a night for Eleanor to publicly reassert her absolute, unchallenged authority. At the end of the evening, Chloe stood to make a speech. She stood poised and confident, a young queen in her own right, and she spoke not of childish things, but of the future. She spoke of the Vance global legacy, of the challenges and responsibilities of leading such an empire in a new and dangerous world. And then she announced the creation of a new, independent philanthropic foundation, a foundation that would be her own personal project, endowed with a significant portion of her own future inheritance. The foundation's mission, she explained, would be to provide training, support, and new opportunities for returning military veterans, for the soldiers who had been discarded by the very system they had fought to protect. And then she delivered her masterstroke. To lead this new foundation, she announced, her voice ringing with a clear, unshakable confidence, to serve as its first executive director, I have asked for the guidance and the leadership of a man I consider to be one of the finest strategists and most honorable men I have ever known, a man whose courage and integrity are beyond reproach, a man to whom I and my mother owe an unpayable debt. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jackson Carter. A stunned electric silence fell over the room, and then from a side door, Jax entered. He was not in a servant suit. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored tuxedo, a man of power and substance, a man who belonged. He had, of course, been a part of Chloe's plan all along. She had sought him out, had found him in the quiet, anonymous life he had tried to build for himself, and had, with a quiet, brilliant, and utterly undeniable logic, convinced him to return, not as a shadow, not as a secret, but as a leader, as her partner in a new, noble mission. He walked to the stage and stood beside Chloe, his presence a quiet, solid pillar of strength. Eleanor, who had been completely ambushed by her own daughter's brilliant, loving coup, stood, her face a mask of shocked, tearful, and profoundly grateful disbelief. Chloe had not just brought Jax back into their lives, she had rewritten the rules of their world. She had given him a new role, a new title, a new, unassailable position of honor and respect. She had made it impossible for anyone, her grandparents, the board, the entire judgmental world, to object. He was no longer the security guard. He was the director of the Vance Foundation, a peer, an equal. She had not just rejected 100 rich men, she had chosen a good one, and had then, with a stroke of strategic genius, made him a king in his own right. She had not just accepted him as her father, she had formally, publicly, and triumphantly presented him to the world as such. Jax looked from Chloe, his fierce, brilliant, and deeply loving daughter, to Eleanor, the queen who was, once again, his to protect. And he knew, with a profound, soul-deep certainty, that his long, lonely war was finally over. He had found his platoon, he had found his mission, he had found his home. Your generous support through Super Thanks ensures that the fire of these powerful memories, these stories of love, honor, and the quiet, revolutionary power of a child's heart will never be extinguished. Thank you.